Good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
Good afternoon.
I'm good.
Oh, good. How are your theses coming along?
I've actually started working on mine more. I just have to do little parts, like adding like the tables and figures and things. Pretty much. Yeah. But the background and my materials and methods are pretty much done for the most part.
Oh, good. Good. How many of you have started on your presentation? Anyone? Majela, have you started on your presentation? Like just starting to create it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who else has started? Well, maybe this is a good time to talk just a little bit about how to do that. Remember, your theses are due on March 15th. And so I thought I would do just a little primer, just some practical stuff about putting together a presentation. And maybe at the end of this, I could get a volunteer to try presenting what we have in 2 weeks. Next week, we have a guest speaker. And so I think it would be March, I believe, 5th. And it would be a great opportunity to kind of practice what you've already done, get some feedback on it, so you can improve it for your final presentation, your defense, and for your public presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's resize this so you get a better view. Okay. Now, most of you have probably already given presentations in the past. Is there anyone here that suffers from a lot of anxiety, like gets really nervous about giving presentations? Well, if you do, you're probably nervous to speak up and say that you get nervous. I can understand that. So hopefully if you kind of follow along these lines, it won't be so excruciating and won't be so nerve-wracking. I don't like anxiety and I don't like giving students anxiety. You want to think of giving your presentation as storytelling. Okay, giving a science seminar is a lot like telling a story. You want to engage your audience and guide them through. You want to tell them, what they need to know to understand your project. Tell them what you did and show them the results, and tell them what it means and why it's important. And all that kind of weaves together. So don't think of your presentation as, oh, I've got my PowerPoints, I'm going to present my PowerPoint. That's not what you're doing. You are presenting your research. Your PowerPoints are just a tool to help others visualize while you're talking. Okay? So just like there are parts of a story, there's the intro, there's the, for the different parts of the plot. For doing your thesis presentation, there's parts to it as well. And you're familiar with the parts. There's an intro, you'll have materials and methods, you'll have results, you'll have a conclusion where you kind of summarize your results and tell them the significance, why those results are important. And then, of course, you want a thank you slide at the end. And it's important in those thank you slides, if you've gotten any funding, like if you were a research intern, you want to cite that funding source. That's really important to put on that final thank you slide. And just like storytelling, you got to think about style. Everybody has their own unique style, and you want to play to your style. You want to feel comfortable and natural. And the more comfortable and natural you feel, the better your presentation will go, because that will relax everybody. So don't stress about the delivery. Two key points so you don't stress over it when you get up in front of an audience. One is It will be easier for you to remember what you want to say if it follows a logical progression and it makes sense to you. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't have anything in there that that you don't understand. Like if you're kind of unsure about a certain part of the research, make sure to talk to your advisor over and over again until you feel confident with that. And if it follows a logical flow and it makes sense to you, it'll be really easy to remember. And once you see a slide, you'll know exactly what you want to say. In fact, you'll see a slide and you'll know what you want to say in the slide after that. And the key to that, the second part, besides making sure it's in a logical flow, is practice. Practice, 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 practice. Practice till you're blue in the face. Practice till you've practiced it so many times that you're sick of it. And once you get to the stage where you're sick of it, you'll find that when it comes time to do it, you're way less nervous, way less nervous. Just remember, the more engaged the audience is, the more they'll understand and remember it, and the more excited they'll be about it. And you are the strongest focal point of that, not your PowerPoint. Your PowerPoint, again, is just this tool. You, a human being, is the strongest advocate you've got for your research. And so make eye contact. Even if you're doing in Zoom, you want to look into the camera as much as you can. Talk with your hands. If you can, be animated. Use voice inflection. You don't want to be monotone. And you don't want to read directly from the slides. Is there a question? So you don't want to be monotone and you don't want to read directly from the slides. You want to paraphrase what's on the slides as you go along. And if you raise your voice and lower your voice, make it interesting, that will be engaging to folks. So again, think of these PowerPoints as just illustrations. There's some key features that everybody will have. You'll have a title slide, which will have, hopefully some kind of captivating picture, which captures what your project's about. Then in the rest of the PowerPoint, you'll have figures that help you explain different parts of your project, whether it's the introduction, maybe possibly some of the methods if they're complicated, and your results. So you're going to use figures from your thesis, like in your results section, to act as kind of like a thing on the side where you can point to things and say, see here, this is what we're going. But remember, the delivery is you're telling the story. And if you approach it in that way, it will feel a lot more professional, it'll feel a lot more relaxed, and it'll be less nerve-wracking to prepare for. A couple notes about PowerPoints. Try not to use backgrounds that distract. There's been a lot of studies that have looked at different kinds of backgrounds. They do the same slide presentation to an audience, to a few different audiences. And in one, they have one background, another one, same material, different background. And what a lot of those studies had shown is that the more detailed the backgrounds, the less people remembered or understood from the lecture that they were listening to, because their eyes get distracted. They're not paying attention to what you're saying. They're looking for meaning where there isn't any. So try and keep your backgrounds fairly simple. Use at least 24-point font. That's what I have up here right now. This is in Calibri right now, but it's about the size you want. 12-point font will be too small. And the other thing you want to be careful about is you don't want to crowd your slides. If you have too much writing on your slide, then while you're talking, what the person will be doing is they'll be reading what's on the slide instead of listening to you talk. And they'll have no idea what you just said because they were focused on. How many of you just were reading the whole slide while I was talking? Yes, no? You guys are quiet today. It's weird. I can't tell if I'm bombing or doing okay. I can see why comedians don't like.
Can we do a presentation in a form of a poster or no?
No, simple one is new. Yeah, we don't, that's not how the department or the school lets you do them. They have to be an oral presentation. I think I've only seen PowerPoint presentations, came close to somebody who used a board a lot, but just about everybody used PowerPoint, but no on the posters. But it's the same spiel. You can take a poster you already have and put them, different parts of it, into slides. You don't cover the poster all at once. You do it in a certain order. Just put that order in your slides. So, number one key, once you get it done, practice, 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 keep practicing. That's the number one thing that's going to reduce your stress and your anxiety when it comes to talk. It'll make your presentation 10 times better because you'll be on point. You'll remember everything you want to say, or mostly everything. It's okay to forget a couple things you plan to say. If it's important, somebody will ask you a question about it later. They don't know what you planned to say. They just know what you're saying. So if you forget something, just roll with it and keep going. But practicing really, really makes a difference. What I like to do with my students in my lab is they'll practice, and then we'll do another practice presentation, and then I'll ask them, okay, what's on the next slide? What's on the next slide? Before they even look at the slide, how are you going to introduce it? Because one strong tactic or way of giving a presentation is before you start talking about a slide, or before you show the slide, you should start talking about it. And that tends to make the flow feel like the focus is on you rather on the slides. But if you stop at the end of a slide and then switch the slide and then start talking, then it seems like you've waited for the slide to do it. It feels like the PowerPoint is leading the presentation. And these are just general practical things. You probably already know them, but it's good to reiterate them to remind you. And the practicing thing, I can't underscore the most. The only other section beyond these, so that's part of your presentation. After your presentation, there's going to be a Q&A, questions, time for questions. And you want to make sure, one, that you understood all the words that you use. So don't use any scientific terms you don't know what they mean, because that's lame to get a question on a word you've used and you don't really know what it means. Make sure you understand why you did each step in your project. So when you're going over your methods, understand why you did each step and how the methods work. And you probably won't have much of a problem. Most people understand their results. It's just sometimes they don't focus as much on understanding their own methods. So what I'd like to get are some, did you notice that in the slide before, in the question and answer, I started talking about it before I brought up the slide. In this one, I waited, and now it kind of feels like the PowerPoint's leading the discussion. But I do want to get some volunteers for 2 weeks from now. Does anybody want to do a practice presentation?
I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'm not there yet.
Even if you're not done with it now in 2 weeks, I mean, think about it. The 15th is coming up pretty fast. So you're doing a lot of work on your thesis as it is. You know it really well. It's a good time to try and give it a shot. You don't have to be completely done with your presentation. I had a student that presented on Wednesday. She still hadn't gotten in all of her results, but it was a very useful session, not just for her, but also for the rest of the class, because we talked about how you go from your thesis that's written down into a PowerPoint presentation, what her process was like. But it's easier to do when you have a specific person and their presentation, and you can talk about that process. Any questions?
Somebody said, is it the same as presenting at a conference in the chat?
Yes, absolutely. It's very much like presenting at a conference. If you've done that already, then it's very much the same way. And again, when you've been at conferences, you've noticed which speakers feel like they know what they're talking about, and those that, you know, are just reading from the slides. And really the key difference between the two is one reads from the slides and one doesn't. One has practiced, and so they kind of feel more natural and comfortable. And so it just seems like they know a lot more. They might know exactly the same amount, but it sure makes a difference in terms of how it feels to the audience. And you certainly want your committee members thinking that you understand it.
Does it have to be a certain time limit?
Well, for your defense, you know, with just your committee, it'll probably be anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. You know, you want to go in detail. For the presentations, for the public presentations that they schedule, often those are pared down to about 15 minutes. It's hard sometimes to give all that information in 15 minutes.
People with proposals, they still have to do presentations, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have a proposal. So I know that people with proposals don't necessarily have a results section. They put everything in the discussion. So with the like adding tables, because the articles have some, for me, has some tables, do I still add all that to my proposal?
So it's nice when you're doing a proposal, when you get to the results, say, well, this is the kind of data that I'll be looking at. These are the kind of results that I might see. And if they skew this way, I'll interpret it this way and conclude this. If they skew this way, like for example, somebody was doing a proposal and in the process they were going to do blue-white screening. So they showed some pictures of blue-white screening and say, see, my data will look, you know, I'll see some colonies that are blue and some that are white. I'll count them up and do whatever. That's not their data, but it's showing samples of data to give them an idea what things will be like.
So you're saying people with proposals have to have a results section? I thought you said that we didn't have a
what I'm saying is when you give your presentation, it's probably, it will look better if you talk a little bit about what your results might be like. You don't have to have a results section because you don't have results, but you'll want to address what kind of results, you know, you're proposing your methods, which suggests, you know, what kind of data you'll be collecting, you know, and then so it's kind of nice to show an example of what that might be.
Okay, so and with the presentation, do we have to add all those tables into the presentation as well?
Anything that you've included in your proposal, any of those tables in your proposal, you should include. You don't really have to include many beyond that.
Okay, thank you. One last question.
Sure.
I emailed you last Friday just for clarification. The signatures that we get those afterward, or that had those before it's due?
No, afterwards. So
Okay.
the way it works is you'll finish your thesis, you'll have your final draft, you'll send to your advisor and your committee members. Your committee members will read it probably right before your defense. You'll go to your defense. They'll ask you a bunch of questions. You'll do your presentation and all that. And then they'll basically take a vote as to whether you should pass or not. And often they'll be like, yeah, you should pass, but I want you to make this change or that change, or here are some edits. You know, since I've read your draft, here's a couple, you know, things you might want to change. Or maybe it comes up during the discussion in your defense, oh, you need to add this figure or do whatever. You'll make those changes, and then finally, when you've satisfied your committee, then you send them around the page to sign. And sometimes when you do your defense, if everybody's happy with it, they'll sign right there. They're like, okay, send me your paper, we'll give you the signature right there. But it's not till after the defense.
So That defense is after March 15th?
Mhm.
Okay.
You got to have your final draft in by then. But there's always, once you do your defense, there may be some edits that come afterwards prior to publication.
Okay.
Because we'll publish all of these and keep a copy in the library, as well as you'll get a copy and your advisor will get a copy. Any other questions? Now, if at any point people want to do practice presentations, just shoot me an email. I'll put you on the list. But in 2 weeks, it's probably a good time. I'm sure we'll probably do some after that. But next week we have a guest speaker.
My question is not necessarily about the presentation. It's about the thesis paper itself.
Mhm.
I just wanted more clarity about the basis of a background.
Okay, you're talking about for the lit review? There's like
Yes,
the,
sir.
so it, as the little thing states, there's an introduction, which is like a paragraph or two, just giving a general description of your research, of your project. And then you've got your lit review, which could be several pages long.
Yeah.
And that tells them everything they need to know to understand your project.
Okay, so do you label that part background or lit review?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So do you label that part background or lit review?
Background.
Okay.
Background. And there's a template online if you saw it on Moodle, a thesis template if you want to see somebody else's thesis and how they did it. They
Yes,
passed.
I saw it, but the main issue was I didn't see how I could correlate what I had to what, their template. So I'm just stuck on that.
Okay. Well, if you send me what you have, I can take a look to see if there's any suggestions I can make.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody else have any general questions? Okay, well then I guess I can let you guys go. I just want to make sure that you kind of know what's in the loop next. After you turn in your thesis, these presentations have to happen and defenses. And we can talk more about them in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
everybody. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.